I wanted to welcome you to this Baton Rouge Community College panel, which is part of the Public Library's One Book, One Community series of events. The Public Library has included in this series everything from understanding place, how to buy a house, oral histories, talks on racial healing, and eventually on May 15th there will be an appearance by the author of The Yellow House, Sarah Broom. This incredibly rich lineup came in the middle of a pandemic and social distancing, and I think it's really a testament to how committed the library is to keeping an important and critical discussion going at a time, when we need it. The Yellow House is a story about being rooted in a place and having to leave it. Toni Morrison, another American author who focused on the Black experience, said, "Home is a memory. Home is your history." We all remember our first house or the place that became our home, and likely we remember leaving it. Toni Morrison said, "I don't want closure." She said, "I want what I got, my memories." In this panel, we'll look at some memories that are left by, inspired by another American author, Sarah Broom, and how those memories can really help us heal as individuals and to find purpose and to come together as a community, I think faithful to the One Book, One Community series. The first speaker we'll have is Carrie Causey. She is in the English department at Baton Rouge Community College, and she'll read us some poetry. Well, second, we'll have a performance by Danielle Vignes, which this performance will offer a dynamic approach to healing. Third, we'll have Professor Whitton, chair of the English and Humanities department, discuss truth and perspective while challenging readers and authors to think about purpose and meaning, not only in life, but in their memories. So thank you, and we'll let Carrie take over.
All right, well, thank y'all all for coming. I just absolutely love this book. I was so moved by this book as a reader and as a writer. I felt very kindred with her because I also grew up with a bazillion cousins, and I have 11 aunts and uncles. I was also that kind of child that she was, that was always paying attention and very proud of where she is from, paying attention to the textures of things, and also the interior, right? This interior geography that she has, this awareness of, even as a child, how this house belongs to her at a soul level, how people are places too. So just absolutely beautiful book. Many of the poems that I'm going to read today have to do with her essential question in the book. This is about Katrina, but it's really about, like, what do we do when we lose our sense of home, our center? What do we do when we lose whether that's a person or a place or a house or all three? How do we reckon with that? And this is her reckoning, and this is her answer to that. Her telling this story is an answer to that question. I also want to just sort of acknowledge that I am currently going through something very similar. Actually, today, all of those aunts and uncles and all of those cousins are gathering at my grandpa's house. He recently died in October. And we are clearing the house. We're taking down him. We're taking down the art, the little knickknacks. We're taking out my grandmother too, our matriarch and our patriarch. And I'm not going to cry today, I swear, but it's just kind of funny how many of the poems that I wrote so long ago really resonate with this question: how do we navigate that loss, that erasure? And I think her answer is that we find those places again on the inside, in our memory, in our imagination, in the truthful way that our imagination distorts memory, right? In that mythos kind of way that still tells the truth, but tells it slant, as Emily Dickinson would say. So I do want to read, before I get into these poems, another Toni Morrison quote, because she's amazing. And this is a quote that actually Sarah Broom clung to as she wrote this novel. It is in the book as an epigraph. And she said that this quote gave her courage to tell the story, because she didn't at first feel like she could tell this story. But she kept going back to this quote. It's from an essay, The Site of Memory. And Toni Morrison says, "You know, they straightened out the Mississippi River in places to make room for houses and livable acreage. Occasionally, the river floods these places. Floods is the word they use. But in fact, it is not flooding. It is remembering. Remembering where it used to be. All water has perfect memory and is forever trying to get back to where it was. Writers are like that. Remembering where we were, that valley we ran through, what the banks were like, the light that was there, and the route back to our original place. It is emotional memory, what the nerves and the skin remember, as well as how it appeared. And a rush of imagination is our flooding." I think that's just beautiful. So we can all think about those places, even as I read my places to you, my flooding, okay? Still think about your own people, places, the landscapes that are in you. You grew up with these landscapes, these skyscapes, this soil, whatever it is, these people, these houses. Another wonderful epigraph in the book is that the things we have forgotten are housed. Our soul is an abode, and by remembering houses and rooms, we learn to abide within ourselves. So I think that's the answer to how we navigate it. We've got to go within, we've got to abide there, process it. So I want to read just a couple poems. The first one is called Creek. When I went into myself, I asked myself this question long ago, because I had to write a manuscript out of nowhere in grad school. And so I thought, what do I miss? I was grieving for Louisiana at the time. I was in Nashville. And I saw this quote from Rilke. He says, "Go deep within and find that place from which your life flows, and at it you will find your source." So I kept pulling up these kinds of poems. This one, Creek, is a memory of being in Mississippi with that red soil. There's no red soil in here, but I can still see this field, my grandmother's back field, and this little girl wandering through. Creek. Now it is easy to find where the creek dwindles, where it thickens at last, where its mouth closes into a ditch near the highway. The world was also small when you were young. Trees bowed inwardly, giving you leaves, for you had light in your vessel, jumping and lapping like the creek carried home in a mason jar, a small audience of ghosts following you in the wind, like wind continued ahead as birds. Now it is impossible to be a creek. Rub clay inside the canals of your ears, swallow a small stone. Don't you remember? Its face is an eye. It's only you who sees your memories run across it. This next one captures fog. I grew up by the river, Mississippi River, in St. Gabriel off near River Road. And this is about that fog coming in from the river. It's called Fog at the Door. Next time the fog comes in from the river, like the creator of long hair and limbs, next time I go to meet it. I go back to my parents' house and come out of my bedroom, down the stairs, out of the front door into the dark. I go as a girl. I take my little brother with me, and he falls asleep on his stomach under the waves. The peacocks on the neighbor's roof finally sleep, and the cows on the levee are wreathed with it, the fog coming in from the river, careful over the sticks to the backyard trampoline, the poor man's family swimming pool covered with leaves, where just high enough from the ground, the fog settles over like the shallows, and I lie back and pull its strings. I stand up in the gauze and collect it around me as a skirt. I jump through the way laughter can be, an arrow parting a cloud, straight through with the moon close enough to lick as a stamp. I see it now driving in around the wooden house, And I want to wake my parents to take a cup of it up the stairs in my hands to make them taste or listen. Next time, I say to the fog at our door, a visitor I must appease. The house protects the dreamer. This house allows one to dream. So this next one is called Girl Playing Dead. It's a weird poem. It's a little weird poem. It's read backwards, but read backwards for a reason, because this little girl is a little backwards. Remembering yourself as a kid, the kind of freedom that you had as a kid to explore, to be a little crazy, dramatic, maudlin, whatever you wanted. Young again, the throat painted with one dry coat. At the balcony with a conch shell, nakedly through the house upstairs to behold her, or to have her gallop again as she used to, at all angles, to have her get up and walk. Warmth without heat, piercing at the ends, under the carpet, the light on me a kindness. What was she? Now cool as the cat's head, lying on the carpet on my back, they will ask, oh, my children, when they find my body cut with softness and spears and knots. For my mourners, for my little ones, this thing held loose in my palm is an heirloom. Mom's tomato pincushion through one hand, skin you can shine a flashlight through, and the heart beating, and the lizard skin. I have to roll my jaunty skeleton in dust just to play dead. And then these last ones definitely resonate with what's happening now at Grandpa's house right now. This one's called Family Tree. It's very short. I also wrote or thought of this one in New Orleans, thinking of how so many cemeteries are in New Orleans, and of course, the land itself. Family Tree. The way from blood meal, bone meal, a tree grows stronger from the corpse, taller, more conscious of the air around its limbs and the light. The way we would not call the dead not living, nor do I say the dead are alive when we pass a cemetery. We say nothing. I am in the truck with my father. It is a natural silence, I think, the kind among blood. So instead of It, which she plays in the book, when we were kids, we played something called Murder in the Dark. Okay, which was just hide. It actually was just chase. And I always hated it. I was like her. I would just go hide somewhere and just wait for it to be over, or just walk inside. So this is a little bit of Murder in the Dark. The only moon, a birdhouse peeking, white, murky in the dark. This child under the outside sink belly, where the uncles clean their fish. One kid in the ditch, and another behind the woodpile, nose close to a locust's old skin clinging to the bark. And quieter than the skeleton when the wind moves it, the children crop up in the darkness, the only clouds. Flash a blue-white t-shirt or leg like the flesh of a carved stick, passing tonight's scraps of bones and rice in the ceramic dog dish when they come, hunchbacks, to the long white base of the truck, on the palms of their feet, on the milky brick. If caught in some giant's clasp of hands, they are the fires inside, catching each other, striking in the cast dark, the maniacal laughter full of glass and silt. So those are my cousins playing around just outside River Road. And this very last one I'm going to read is called Let the Cat Die. You guys know that expression? You're swinging, and when you quit swinging, you call it, you let the cat die. Just let the cat die. So I like to go out and play this game when I was little, and I considered it a kind of meditation. I like to do it when nobody was watching. So here it is, Let the Cat Die. I never liked the name for it, but you can play it alone. So if anyone sees you, they will say, she's just out there swinging in the backyard, not testing her mind for any open doors. Who knows where you'll go this time? Readying the ropes, swinging open the mildewed seat. Lock your legs, shake limbs free from your hands, raise up on your feet. There is no winner, but if you want, you can pretend. Vow to the ground you're giving it all your weight. You're the high note and the cue arching back. Tell the air in front of your face to move. Then let go, body of feet. Let the cat die and ride your own time. When you are old, the game will be let go, body of grief. Let go of your skin. Slip down the well sides to what are you holding on to and why? How long can you abide this world, the world moving with shut eyes, or that there is always some earth under the earth? Where gravity slows and X at your toes. I never felt anything die then. The game is, how long can you keep alive, falling inward against that slack? The sound the dirt makes, changing, how quietly it opens the eyes of any sleeping cat. Thank you so much.
Okay, hi, my name is Danielle Veen. I'm an associate professor in communication at Baton Rouge Community College. Today I am excited to share with you some excerpts from some articles and performance script that I wrote several years ago called Hang It Out to Dry. It's was a solo performance about the washed away community and spun tales of Chalmette, Louisiana, in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. It was performed, or it's been performed since 2006, and the show tells the story of how multiple voices of lived experience can offer insight into the larger community. The performance depicts the struggles, hopes, and fears that many St. Bernard Parish community members faced years after the storm. Home is a place where my affections are centered. Home is my place of origin, my residence, my refuge. As a native of St. Bernard Parish, Louisiana, home is a place called Chalmette, the location of the Battle of New Orleans, surrounded by water, filled with history and overflowing with storytellers. Spanish-speaking settlers from the Canary Islands, one of the first groups to establish themselves in the area around 1778, have told stories there for centuries. As a descendant of the Isleños, literally referring to islanders of St. Bernard Parish, I have witnessed the proliferation of stories told through folk artists such as my great-great-uncle Joseph Chalito Campo, my great-grandmother Matilda Guerra Campo, and my father, Kenneth Sears Sr. As a performance artist and scholar in performance studies, the proverbial baton, as a storyteller of my heritage, have been passed to me. As Walter Benjamin states in his 1936 essay, The Storyteller, and storytelling is a communicable experience, an active process between storyteller and listener, in which the act of repeating stories creates a transmission of human experience. For Benjamin, the storyteller, like the sage, is granted the ability to reach back through a whole lifetime, a life, incidentally, that comprises not only his own experience, but much of the experience of others. What the storyteller knows from hearsay is added to what is most his own. His gift is the ability to relate his life, his distinction, to be able to relate his entire life. Hang it out to dry. Charles Pete Savoy, personal interview, September 1st, 2006. They didn't try hard enough, really. It was Junior Rodriguez and I who would be meeting with the Corps of Engineers. And then the last 4 or 5 years, Dan Arsenault, he got involved. And he attends more meetings than I do. And none of the council members would go. You know, we'd walk in and they say, "Here come them 3 old guys again. You know, same tree." but nobody was concerned. Nobody. Now everybody's concerned, okay? We've been eating more money on that thing. Now the truth of it is, most people don't realize, but originally we had 4 natural ridges out there, okay? We had one in Bayou La Loutre, one in Wyclosky, and one in Bayou Dupree, and one in Bayou Bienvenue, okay? But our water to come in from the Gulf of Mexico would have to go over each of them ridges and then over all that marsh. And now all them ridges are cut out. So that water just comes right on in. And this marsh that used to protect us is no longer there because of that saltwater intrusion done killed everything, you see? Now that thing used to be like 600 feet wide, okay? Now that thing's like 3,000 feet wide, and it don't stop there because they got all these canals and tributaries going out for miles and miles, you see? Killing everything. You get on top of that bridge there. You coming from this way. You look down. You're going to see nothing but water. No land anywhere. All because of that saltwater intrusion. And you see, all because of that, Mr. Go. I was out there. I was the inspector, the seismographic inspector for the parish for 3 years. And I was out there every day, 7 days a week. I said, I got to be nuts, you know. But what I was trying to do was get somebody out there to close it, to stop destroying the marsh. And I saw it happen. You go out there, you get in a little boat, you might see a little patch of island, okay? Then go a week or 2 later. You're not going to find that island. That island just got sucked away. That water just sucks everything away. That Mr. Go sucks everything away. Gene Alonzo, personal interview, November 11th, 2006. We picked up everything. I didn't think it was going to be that bad, you know, as bad as it was. I told Eloise, I said, you don't have to go all the way out there to Texas. You know, she wanted to go running out to Texas. I said, stay right here with me at St. Rita's. It ain't gonna be that bad. No, I got to go. I got to get out of here. I said, fine then. Don't get yourself killed out on the road going all the way out to Texas. You know, St. Bernard's right here. So she left and all, and I went over to St. Rita's with a couple of clothes to stay with Carlos, my brother, because he don't know nothing, you know. We got there and everything was nice. The day before, and that night, the wind started blowing real hard. Carlos calling out. I said, it's all right, bro. It's just blowing. Looking at that television and that damn storm. I mean, it looked bad. I started thinking maybe we should get out. But then you heard the roads being jammed, and well, the storm was passing its worst to Slidell. The wind was out to the northwest. And like in the morning, them guys started hollering about the water's coming, the water's coming. Man, I looked. I saw animals crossing the road. I said, son of a gun. And they had water coming, you know, through the yard. But it was still low. But Lord, in 5 minutes, I'm standing by the glass door of St. Rita's, and the water's halfway up the door like that, and it wasn't even leaking in. That's how fast it came. It never leaked in the place. I'm looking at it. It's coming up the door like that halfway. I said, oh my God. Shannon Sanders, personal interview, October 17th, 2006. The parish was a wonderful place to grow up. It really was. All my closest friends were from there, but the parish is not like what it was when we grew up. In my opinion, it'll never be, because the people are no longer there. And, you know, it's not the landmarks that make Chalmette Chalmette. It's the people. My friends are gone, and so is my family, and so it's just very painful for me to go back and see all of that there, you know? To see people living in trailers, and the corner store where you grew up is no longer there, and it's an entirely different place. It's not safe. I had a friend that works for FEMA, and she said that in so many words, they're discouraging people from moving back there because of the oil spill and just the unknown. She thinks they're trying to make it an industrial city with just the oil there, and it's really inhabitable to live. That's just her opinion, and that's just my opinion also. And by no means does it mean that I want to go back. I mean, if they want to go back and take a chance, let them. I don't really know anybody there anymore, with the exception of maybe one or two people. It's not a place where you can stroll your baby. You can't do that. There may be one or two houses on the street that are functioning on the block. And then some that haven't even been gutted yet. No grass, rats running around, debris everywhere still, no backyard, no environment. Where's my kid going to play? I don't want to go there and have to raise a kid. There's nowhere for the kid to play. And for those who are diehard Chalmatians, as they may say, they might want to go back to Chalmette in spite of all those things because they want to go home. But it's more than that for me. I wouldn't want to endanger my kid. It's not well lit at night. There's a lot of crime. They've lit the streets only where people are living on them. I hear stories that people are scared to death to go to sleep at night because they hear all kinds of things. There's a lot of potential for things to go wrong in Chalmette. And I have to give it to the people. They're trying to make a comeback. But goodness, at some point, you just got to throw in a towel. I'm not saying I won't support those who are trying to make a comeback. I'm not saying I won't go back to visit. But my Chalmette days are over. I'll never live there again. I won't raise my baby in the middle of all that devastation because that's just not what I remember. The edge of the palms. The Isleños are a Spanish-speaking community in St. Bernard Parish whose origins in Louisiana date from the late 18th century as colonists from the Canary Islands. Their most preserved art form is the decima. Decimas are 10 to 12 stanza narrative songs embodying themes of sarcasm, humor, irony, local events, mishaps, and personal inspiration. In conversing with Mr. Irvin Perez, one of the last old-time decimeros of the community, we talked about the decimas and if there were ever any sung about hurricanes in the past. He said no, that themes of tragedy and disaster just weren't worth singing about. He said he doesn't like to talk about the storm because he wasn't there. Having evacuated, he didn't experience it like other people who rode out the storm. We did agree, however, that there is one song that can be used in thinking about the loss of our community. The Edge of the Palms. That decima about a young orphan girl found living in the palm trees, who, when asked where she came from, responds, "I have no father or mother, no friend to console me. I move with the waves of the sea." When I think about this song, I think about all the residents of my community moving with the waves of the sea, with the waves of Lake Bourne, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Industrial Canal. I think about all those folks who are still moving with the waves without family or friends, someone to console them. I think about our land, a land that's soaked deep with histories and stories that Mr. Urban Perez would say, you could tell for the rest of your life. I think about my family, my ancestors, and the palm trees, the refuge we all seek to call home. The edge of the palms, a la orilla de un palmar, a la orilla de un palmar, yo visto una joven bella, su boquita decorada, sus ojitos hondos estrella. A pasar le pregunté de quién vivía con ella y me contestó llorando, sola vivió en el palmar, soy huérfana, no tengo padre ni madre, ni un amiguito que me quiera consolar. Solita vivió en este mundo esperando, y solita voy y vengo como la ola del mar. Thank you.
Well, I think that's plenty. Thank you both for sharing such personal stories of your own lives and of the lives of others that went through some of the things that Sarah talks about in this book. So I'd just like to wrap up our time this afternoon by talking a little bit more about the Yellow House and how it works to sort of bridge what we've heard from the personal story into the genre of autobiography or memoir. So how many of you have had a chance to read the book? A couple, or I saw some starting and reading it outside on the bench. So before the author comes, I really encourage you to finish reading. It is a beautiful autobiography. And the genre of autobiography, of course, we know is several thousand years old, a very early human activity writing about oneself. But there always have been questions about authenticity in writing an autobiography or a memoir. Some of the earliest autobiographies were actually written for specific reasons, such as an apology. If we go back to Flavius Josephus, he wanted to justify things that happened in his life and give an account for others to read. If we think about someone like St. Augustine, he was writing a confession, right, where he wanted others to learn from some of the mistakes that he made and perhaps not make those same mistakes. So autobiography gradually evolved into a kind of writing that was meant to inspire others. Thus, you might not always want to tell the complete truth, right? If you look at someone like Benjamin Franklin, if you read his autobiography, truth is not really his motivation. He wants you to learn from the way that he lived, which seems to have been very regimented. And I think if we checked in, we would find there are some slight differences from what happened in his life to the way that he gave it. We also find that autobiography is often constructed to inspire us, For instance, in the interesting narrative of the life of Olade Equiano, he was very specifically writing about slavery and the difference between his culture and the culture that he was captured and came into. If you look at this picture here, you'll notice that here we have a man who's from Northern Africa, raised in an Islamic village, who converts to Christianity and uses in his autobiography a frontispiece showing himself in European dress and holding a Bible that is opened to the passage in Acts where Philip meets the Ethiopian, right? To say that I am bridging these worlds. Very, very clear choices. If we look at the incidents of the life of a slave girl by Harriet Jacobs or the autobiography of Frederick Douglass, they are activists. They want to reveal what happens during slavery for people to make decisions and changes. Others often write in an attempt to capture authenticity, right? If we look at someone like Frank McCourt and Angela's Ashes or James McBride in The Color of Water, they're telling us their experiences, and there's this real desire to give it to you as clearly as they can. I include here also James Frye, who I am still working and have been for many years on a comparison of actually Benjamin Franklin and James Frye. You know, he originally intended his memoir, A Million Little Pieces, to be fiction and pitched it that way, but his agent said this works better as memoir, and kind of like Milli Vanilli, I guess we know the rest is history. This did not work out very well for James Frye, but I think it raises an interesting point about how important authenticity is when we come to the Yellow House. So from the very beginning, there is hinted in that beautiful, lyrical, poetic introduction some issues that the author has with authenticity. I think, Clarence, this is one of the quotes that really hit you when you started reading this book. Simon Broom, Sarah's older brother, remember she's the youngest, so this is one of her many older brothers, says, you know, there's a lot we have subconsciously agreed that we don't want to know. He goes on, it's a problem when you're talking too much, right? And he actually tells Sarah that by telling the stories of their family, by writing this all down here, Sarah will disrupt, she will unravel and tear down everything the Broom family has ever built. I'm amazed she kept writing. But she had the strength to continue to try to tell the story. So this issue of authenticity can be quite dangerous. Also in that introduction, she uses that phrase, that sentence her mother becomes famous for saying, you know, this house not all that comfortable for other people, right? And she says, I have to come to terms with the fact, right, that my family in some senses was open, but in other senses was closed. And as the youngest child, there came a point when her family no longer invited people into their home. I think there's also a real interesting point here of voice in the Yellow House. So birth order certainly makes a difference. Sarah is the youngest. You'll remember the house, if you've read the book, was originally green, right? She mentions at some point it was the greenhouse for a lot of her siblings. And she chooses the Yellow House as the title of this memoir because that's what it was for her. Survival then becomes very much connected to the house because it survives not just Hurricane Katrina, but also Hurricane Betsy. And the water comes just as high in many places during Hurricane Betsy as it does in Katrina. So again, there are plenty of chances to fix this issue in between, and it is not. Sarah says, when you are babyest in a family with 11 older points of view, 11 disparate rallying cries, 11 demanding and pay attention to me voices, all variants of the communal voice, developing your own voice becomes a matter of survival. And she develops that voice in tandem with New Orleans East. Interestingly, her house on Wilson Avenue is just off Chef Mentor Highway. And she points out to us in the book that Chef Mentor means chief liar. When she talks about the way that the East was settled, the way that the various developers came together to put in and reclaim this marshland and build houses on it and sell them, she says there is a lot probably of lying going on. That this is swamp, that there are strange zoning laws that end up making her house one that's now across the street from, at one point, a trailer park, at another point, essentially a dump, right? And that her family is living across the street there. She says of the East, there were more paved roads than walkways. Certain parts of the East were best driven through. Landscapes communicate feelings. Walking, you can grab onto the texture of a place, get up close to the human beings who make it. But driving makes distance. It grows fears. So if you've read the memoir, you know that Chef Mentor is often a very dangerous place for her family. She has a sister who's involved in a car accident and dragged. At some point in the beginning of the memoir, as a child, she gets a pair of glasses, right? And as kind of a symbol of the dualism that she lives, sometimes when she's walking home on Chef Mentor, she will take those glasses off because it becomes painful to see the truth of the reality around her. I included a map here because as I was reading, I also grew up in New Orleans East. And at some point I thought, I wonder how far, I don't remember Wilson Avenue. So the dot here at the bottom of the screen is the yellow house. And if you walked a mile north, you were at my house. I'm there at the top on Norwood Court. So we grew up about a mile apart in New Orleans East. When Sarah got to the point in the book where she mentioned going to Word of Faith Academy, I dropped the book. Because you'll know, she says, if you leave New Orleans, you don't ever tell people you're from New Orleans East because nobody knows what you're talking about. And if you live in New Orleans and they ask you where you go to school, you don't ever say Word of Faith Academy because no one knows what you're talking about. We went to Word of Faith Academy about 5 years apart, and so I found that interesting as well. Unlike Sarah, I was not a native of New Orleans. I moved there when I was about 3. And it's interesting that she says before the storm, New Orleans had the highest proportion of native-born residents of an American city. So 77% of residents in 2000 were natives, which meant that only a small fraction of New Orleanians had ever left for elsewhere before Katrina hit in 2005. If you've, again, read the memoir, you know that she actually goes to Burundi in Africa to get a better sense of, or make sense of, what it was like growing up in New Orleans East. She does return to New Orleans. She works for Ray Nagin during the road home. She is a speechwriter for the mayor. And one of the things that strikes her about her city and coming back is an attempt to really understand it. When she returns, she lives in the French Quarter, which is very different from New Orleans East. And years later, when the Yellow House is finally slated to be torn down, the notification for the family is sent to the Yellow House, which is a moment in the book where she realized just how dysfunctional things have become. She writes, "Perhaps there is a trick of logic that fails me now, but to deliver such notification to the doomed structure itself seems too easy a metaphor for much of what New Orleans represents. Blatant backwardness about the things that count." And again, it's that clear-eyed sense of the problems, but also the family and the joy and the love that I want to leave you with today as we're preparing for her visit in a month. There is this duality in the Yellow House where she loves the place that she lived, she enjoys it, but she also recognizes the problems. And I think most of us have had that experience of childhood. You know, in listening to the poems today and listening to the narratives from Chalmette, you captured that duality well, right? That there are things that you loved as a child that also frightened you. There were things that you look back at and you can see them in a different way than you did when you were living them. And of course, communities that were torn apart, as we heard from some of your narratives, you want to go back, you want to support the people that are going back, but at the same time, you don't want to go back because it's just not the same. So when Sarah returns to New Orleans, I think most of that year is spent writing this book, so she doesn't talk about that a lot, but she's, again, living in the French Quarter. And if there's any complaint I've heard about this memoir, it's, well, when was it, going to wrap up? In the end there, I wasn't sure what she was trying to tell us. And I think what she's trying to capture are those very distinct and different experiences. The book comes to kind of a conclusion on Wilson Street with some of her brothers doing rather ordinary things like mowing the grass on their vacant lot and considering and thinking about what this place means. She says the house was the only thing that belonged to all of us. It was what we shared in common. We seemed like the only ones who could still see. So what is it that you see looking back in your life that others don't see? How does telling a story become sort of a participatory act and often lead to myth creating, right? Where in looking back, we change the things that we have experienced. So I definitely hope if you haven't finished the book that you will. And the whole panel, I believe, is now open to your questions. So thank you guys for coming this afternoon.
I haven't gotten very far into the book, but I kept thinking, I wish they had done a family tree. I cannot.
They have.
Oh, wonderful. Because I can't keep all these people straight and who relates to what. And so that was the biggest thing that so far has hit me, is that family means something very, very different to this all. A traditional, what I think of as a traditional family, obviously a thing that's getting to question if there's anything anywhere anymore.
Yeah, the library created these beautiful family trees. And I think the point you make is true, that everybody has their sense of what their family story is. And that's one of the things that comes out in the memoir, that even people who grow up in the same family, have the same memories, have different memories of the same events. And ultimately, if you're going to write a memoir, you have to decide, am I going to write from my point of view? Or am I going to try to capture the truth that everyone experienced, which could, I think, make you a little bit crazy, right? To try to get all of their experiences in. But her mother, Ivory May, actually toward the end of the book discovers that a lot of the things she thought she knew about her family are not entirely accurate. So it's interesting that I think Sarah makes the choice to include that to, again, stress for us as readers that she's trying to tell us what she experienced, and it might be different for some of her siblings.
A question. Can you tell us how the ethnographies that you collected? This is from a previous project, correct?
Yes, yes. This was part of my my dissertation. So collected a total of it was 11. It was 11 interviews, and compiled in the show. I performed 8 of them. Then kind of intertwined my own personal narratives. I was living in Baton Rouge during Hurricane Katrina, but you know, my entire family was affected, and so it was, you know, the process of, you know, picking up the pieces along the way.
I'm not as we recently did this month do-it-yourself oral history workshop.
Yes.
How do these ethnographies compare to oral histories? Are they the same thing? What are they just different words for the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you know, in the what you heard today is, you know, performed ethnography, right? Some people may refer to it as everyday life performance, right? But you know, it's in essence the same, right? The words that are spoke today from Jean Alonzo and Pete Savoy and Shannon Sanders, right? They were collected interviews and transcribed word for word. They were videoed
right? So 2006 really shows, right? I didn't have the iPhone back then. I had the video camera, but yeah, they are oral histories, right, as well. I can say too that throughout the years, as I am asked to perform these oral histories, right, or perform ethnography, you really get to see the value, right, of collecting oral history. And as a professor who teaches, right, a performance studies section at BRCC, and encourages in an assignment for students to collect oral histories and the value of, right, the undocumented word. Um, um, Many of these folks that are in my script are no longer here, right? Many of them have been very well documented, be it in research of the Isleño decimas, to the events of Hurricane Katrina, to the closing of the Mississippi River Gulf outlet and the influencing forces that made that happen. And so, yes, there is value right, in oral history, and right, that communicable experience, right, of telling the story.
One more question. Carrie, how did you choose some of these poems, the poetry that you perform today?
Well, I actually had a lot to pick from. So I thought I was going to choose the ones mainly about weather and landscape and rivers. And I ended up going more for poems about myself as a child, or the inner child. And, it's not exactly me, it's my memory of being a child in my house, in my place, in my territory. And that to me spoke to the book a little bit more, because that house is not just about New Orleans or New Orleans East. It's about the family, it's about the people, it's this complexity. It's all wrapped up in the experience of living, and paying attention, and that kind of love that is garnered from just paying attention. So I chose the poems that captured that feeling, for me, that filled me up, especially as I, go through this kind of emotional time with my family. I wanted to choose poems that sort of honored that. I also want to say that, speaking about my grandfather, we worked on a memoir with him before he died. He had a tumor on his brain that was slowly pressing out his memories, but we got all his stories before he lost his memories. And when he did lose his memories, we read the stories back to him, and he was so delighted that someone had written a story about him. He was so happy. And I think that right there is why we should go into memory. It's a gift to yourself. Whatever has been erased, right, we can give it back when we remember. So, thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say or ask a question? Or
That's it. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and come back for another One Book, One Community event. The author, again, her appearance is on May 15th. Thank you.
Thank you.